Okay. All right, let's get started. How's everybody doing? The rain was a little bit of a surprise, but I'm glad to see everybody's here. Okay, let's think back to last week of the VA. Guys have a good time there? Yeah. Anything that really impressed you? How many people rode a power wheelchair for the first time or a hand-powered bike for the first time? Alicia, you had too much fun.
I did very too much.
Yeah. Anybody else have comments about what you saw, what you experienced? Sometimes it can be fun being disabled, right? Or pretending you're disabled. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So today we got some sheets. We have the carpool to the Motion Gait Analysis Lab next Tuesday. Sign up later. I'll also bring this on Thursday. There's the standard Meet with Dave sign up and the attendance sheet. Make sure you sign in with those. So I want to talk a little bit about the your presentation and report. They both together count for 20% of your grade. So I see it as mainly a practice for your final presentation and report. So you got a lot of feedback from your fellow classmates. I sent that all to you. I'll be reading your reports over the next few days, marking them up and sending them back to you. So you should get a lot of feedback on how well you did. And I hope you also looked at other people's presentations and maybe get some presentation tips from what other people did that you could incorporate into your presentation at the end of the course. So with presentations, it just takes practice to do it. You know, the more you do, the better you get. And you all guys did very well. Everybody can benefit from little practice. Okay, the reports, I'll mark them up. I don't grade them, A, B, or C. I just, give you some feedback, whether it's, really good or maybe could be a little bit better. Your final grade considers all your reports and presentations, and you have to make up missed lectures. And everybody usually gets a really good grade because everybody puts in the effort. So I hope you guys will do the same. If you ever have any questions about something, even if it's something very small, if you're worried about, like some people said, you said that the report has to be at least 5 pages. Well, mine is, 10 pages. Is that too many? So, of course it's not too many, but if you have a question about anything like that, just please send me an email. I'll be glad to reply. So today I want to talk about something maybe a little bit offbeat. Failure and the upside of failure. So we talk about the success all the time, but we don't often talk about failure because a lot of times it's considered a negative thing, something to avoid. But in those terms, failure is the opposite of success. But actually, there's some benefits to failure, which I'm going to talk about today. But let's first talk about success. So the big motto is if at first you don't succeed, try again. But if you're skydiving, at first if you don't succeed, don't take up skydiving. So that doesn't work. Well, let's talk about failure. And the big slogan here with Apollo 13, which you guys are all too young to remember, is they said failure is not an option. So I want to ask you, why wasn't failure an option? There's like 3 reasons. Yes, Cassie?
Well, because lives were at stake.
Yes.
It's also a very expensive mission.
Right. Anybody else? The other 2 are sort of subtle. A lot of national pride online. And then everybody was watching it. You know, it was a very exciting time. Again, you weren't there. I was there. You guys are all born too late. You missed all the good stuff. You missed the Beatles. You missed the moon landing. You missed JFK. You missed Motown. So failure was not an option because lives were at stake. But indeed, failure is an option. You can succeed or you can fail. And Adam Savage says that's his motto. And you can buy a t-shirt that says that so you can walk around. There's always a possibility that things won't go as you plan. But is that really a failure? A lot of other people have chimed in on this. Mary Pickford, who was even before my time, said failure is not falling down, it's not getting up again. So the thing there is, don't give up after a setback. So you have to move on. Edison said, in trying to test things that would make a good filament for a light bulb, I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Well, is that 10,000 failures? So his process was I'm going to try everything I can think of, one at a time, and see if I can find something that works. Not the best kind of process, but that's what he tried. So, I think Edison could have had a better understanding of what was going on to make better decisions on what to test. And this is Seth Shostak, who works at the SETI Institute, who looks remarkably like Edison. He's a neat guy. Right? Am I right? Is there a similarity there? I think so. So what company did Thomas J. Watson work for? I heard it. Who said that? Okay. All right. Right. He worked for IBM. And so he said, if you want to increase your success rate, double your failure rate. So what he's saying is that you should prototype a lot and prototype fast, because it's okay to make mistakes, but if you learn from it, you'll benefit, because success is on the far side of failure. So it's what he's saying is, maybe you have to experience a little bit of failure before you can really achieve success. Fail faster, succeed sooner. So the more things that you try, even if they don't work, you're going to learn something from them that will help you in your next design, your next attempt. Accept failure and learn from it. Failure is a blessing in disguise. Failure is a powerful success force. It's only a temporary detour, not a dead end. It's maybe a delay, but not a defeat. It can be a valuable experience. All positive aspects of failure. Ben Franklin says, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. So you should incorporate design failures into your process. That is going to happen. So Ben Franklin was a founding father, but a cartoon father is Homer Simpson, and he has something to say about failure. Trying is the first step toward failure. Well, indeed, you always have to take risks in what you do. I mean, everything you do, there's a potential for a failure. You can fall down, whatever. But you're not going to move forward if you avoid making the first step. Okay? And Professor Dave Beach famously says, embrace failure. And how many people have taken ME 203? Remember that first lecture where he has everybody say, I failed? He really promotes failure. Okay? Poet John Keats says, failure is the highway to success. So again, it's a continuum where you go through a bunch of failures and success is at the end. Failure being a part of that process. So my message to you for working on projects in this class is to prototype early and often, use sketches, think about things, make very cheap, simple designs so you can get it into 3D so you can feel it, so you can involve other parts of your, other senses and parts of your brain. Your brain is very good at visualizing things and feeling things and looking at patterns. You need to employ all your knowledge, senses, skills, and engineering intuition when you're working on a project. So as students, you may not have a lot of intuition, but you're building that up. I mean, you'll get a feel for, you say, well, I don't think that's going to work. You'll get that. And so if you don't have that intuition, maybe you should rely on others' intuition and experience. So it's important for you, working on a project, to engage as many other people as possible so you can get their intuition and their experience and make that be a part of your project. This is a really crucial issue because you have a finite amount of time and it's your most valuable resource and you can't get it back. How are you going to spend your time? You can spend all your time planning. You can spend all your time analyzing, why it's not working. But you really have to also look at, moving on, and that's fabricating the next prototype. I've seen a lot of people get stuck on one part of the process and not move forward, and that just wastes time. Nothing is going to be perfect. As I said, everything is a prototype, so nothing at all is perfect. And it's actually very liberating for you to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to try this. I know it's not going to work, but I'm going to learn something from it. So you don't have to put that burden of success on yourself for every little thing that you do. It's a part of the process to learn from things that don't work. Okay? So there's not a linear path of success. You don't build, everything that you do isn't going to be a success. So you have to manage success and failure from the beginning of your project. Prepare to make the mistakes and experience failures. You have to understand why things don't work and learn from them in order to move on. Okay? Any questions about this? It's going to help you in any problem solving or project class that you have in the future. So looking back at Apollo 13, would you rate it a success or a failure? Vincent.
I'd say it was a success since they were able to get all the astronauts back safely.
Right.
Even after it failed.
Yeah, they didn't succeed in their mission, but they succeeded in getting everybody back. Okay, thanks. And here's the Concorde on its last flight. It got a piece of metal on the runway got sucked into the engine. This was not a design problem of the Concorde, but it caused this failure. It crashed, and it never flew again. Is that a success or failure? I mean, it flew for a long number of years, and it was very expensive, but it still had a market. So is that a success or failure? Eric?
I'd say success. It was helped to advance the aviation industry over the years.
Well, they still have birds and stuff sucked into engines, so I'm not sure they've solved that problem. But you might consider this a failure because they came upon this incident and didn't even try to, they said, okay, that's it, I'm giving up. So they gave up on this. So even though it flew for many years, they gave up on it. So maybe it's a toss-up between success and failure. So what ultimately determines success or failure? Yes?
Economics.
Okay, yeah, maybe. If nobody buys it, you might have a successfully functioning product that works perfectly, but maybe it's too expensive for anybody to buy. Yeah. So, anybody else have thoughts on this? My thought is that if you, yeah,
And the evaluation of a project's outcomes as related to kind of the most recently revised design parameters of
oh, okay.
if you're willing to kind of scrap certain features that you were hoping for along the path, you can get a product out that is a success, but wouldn't have called it a success when we first started the project.
Right. So you're saying that if you have a list of things that say, if we do all this on the project, it will be a success. And if you meet all those by your own definition, it's going to be a success, no matter what else happens. Is that what you're saying, basically?
Yeah, and so implicit on that list could be economic kind of
Right.
benchmarks as well.
Right. So my take on this is, if you give up, I mean, it's a failure. And that could be for, really logical reasons. Maybe you're trying to do something that physics won't allow you to do, and you would never succeed. So maybe you run into nature. So it maybe isn't all up to the designer. Did you have a comment?
I mean, to some extent, is it about time?
Time?
I mean, since we're not in a war,
Yeah.
our society has sort of progressed in a great amount of time, especially in electronics, for instance. We're living longer as we age. I mean, this is why we're having these issues now. So, I mean, part of the reason is like, would you consider the Roman Empire a failure? I mean, it succeeded for
Right.
a long, long time. Right? But now we look at history, is it a success or a failure?
Well, yeah, certainly that view, and
Maybe time is a factor in success or failure.
yeah, very good. Well, it's not, so I think what it's saying is that success or failure is in our minds. And, maybe things that, like the Mayan Empire and the Aztecs and stuff like that, maybe they were successful for a long time, but then they weren't around anymore. So for a time they were successful. So maybe there's a time stamp on it. I mean, you can't be successful, for the rest of eternity. So anyway, okay, thanks. So next Tuesday we're going on our third and final field trip to the Motion and Gait Analysis Lab. It's nearby in Menlo Park. It's a small space, so I ask community people who are not driving not to participate in this because it is such a small space. Students are more than welcome. It'll be really interesting because we're going to be looking at a clinical lab where they test the walking of kids with cerebral palsy. And you'll see the techniques they use to figure out how well the kids walk, and they use that as a means to determine what course of action that kid should have, from surgery to orthotics to exercise or whatever. So this would be quite interesting. So they use a technique called motion capture, which is commonly used in video games and stuff like that, where they can capture the motion with cameras of various body parts and get information from that they can use. So we'll be checking that out, and Dan is going to be our guinea pig, so that's going to be really interesting for us. So here's how you get there. It's off of Middlefield Road, just north of campus. Stanford is down here. So here's the Oval. Here's El Camino, and here's where we're going. So you would, the ideal route is to not take University down, but maybe take one of these side streets toward Middlefield, make a left turn, and it's the first left past Willow Road. So we're going over here. Okay, I'll send the maps out to the drivers. And so here it is here. As you're flying in, you can check it out. And there's lots of parking here, as you see. So that shouldn't be a problem. And so we'll go in the back way, and there's a hallway in here that we'll meet in. Okay? So this Thursday is our Assistive Technology Fair, and there'll be a bunch of vendors right outside here. So we'll sort of congregate out there. They'll be setting up around 4, so by the time you get here, they'll be all set up and ready to go, hopefully. And there's 10 of them. We got wheelchairs and electronic stuff, people from SRI, people with a bunch of hardware and software. Elaine's going to be here with her Rover again. And Ranger, the service dog. Here's a case where a dog is a piece of assistive technology. and some very new things, so that'll be a lot of fun. So one way of going through this is you can do it individually, but maybe a technique that you should use is pair up with somebody that's not on your team and go through it together, and that way you can have a little back and forth between you and this other person. So check that out. That's Thursday. So today we're going to have Terry Adams talk to us about universal design and Ed Roberts campus. So right now we'll take a little break so you have a chance to sign in, get a cookie, stand up and stretch, whatever.
So that's the meeting earlier.
Oh, okay. It's okay. So everybody's got to be someplace. Hi. Cookie. There's no electric door opener for this building.
I know.
Hi, good to see you. Good to see you, Terry.
Nice to see you.
Okay, we got the microphone. Let's see. Turn this around for these places. This right here.
It's okay.
And is there a place to...
Yeah, just, it doesn't matter if it's covered, does it?
Should be sitting
Or what's, oh, okay. I'll just hold it.
We can flip it onto your...
Yeah,
Sure.
okay,
Can you do that for you?
okay.
Okay, that should work.
Okay. Could you open that for me? Thanks.
I have to apologize. I put another bottle of water in the refrigerator because it's still on. So this is...
That's okay. Room temp is fine.
You want a pointer? Laser pointer?
Maybe.
Okay, bring it out there.
Okay. I'm probably going to move when the movie's, I'm going to move when the video's playing, just so I can see it,
Oh, sure.
and then I'll move back. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll start it when you cue me.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, let's get going. It's always a pleasure to have Terry here. She's been presenting in this class from the very beginning. Always has good things to say. I think it's because she's a lawyer. Am I right?
No.
No. I was making a generalization, which is obviously wrong. Okay, Terry Adams is an associate director of the Office of Accessible Education here at Stanford. And the office is committed to providing Stanford students with disabilities the supportive services they need to allow them to take advantage of all the opportunities at Stanford, the rich and varied life here. In addition to academic accommodations, she also expedites housing assignments and facilitates requests related to disability. And I know she's really busy because she always gets, apparently the email traffic runs through her office, through her computer, so she's a very busy person. So let's welcome Terry Adams.
I decided to talk this year about universal design in the context of, Dave's going to show for me a short video that the Ed Roberts campus produced that really illuminates the incorporation of universal design into the entire building. And I had the opportunity to go there, I think it was right near the end of the school year in June. And it was the most accessible building I'd ever been in, which it should be, of course, but it's hard to get across to non-disabled people or temporarily able-bodied people, depending on your politics, how it affects you on a really visceral level to be in a building that was designed for maximum accessibility in every way. Every bathroom stall is a big one with hand bars. There are pie plate sized smack buttons next to the elevator, which goes right down to the BART station. There's a ramp. It's a 2-story building, and there is a very beautiful gradual ramp that goes up to the 2nd floor. And a colleague of mine told me that a friend of his had told him that they had a fire. It wasn't a drill. Somebody pulled the alarm, and they got everybody out in 5 minutes. And the firemen showed up convinced that they were going to have to go look for all the disabled people, and they were all out because it was designed to be able to get people out. So let's look at the video, and then we can talk more about it.
Station in Berkeley, California. It was designed to be a memorial to the life of Ed Roberts, who was an early leader of the independent living movement. It brings together disability services and creates a center that is a resource for everybody within the community.
The Ed Roberts campus is kind of an example of what we can do when we work together.
This building expresses the idea that good design is fundamentally a social justice issue. Everyone deserves the right to a dignified and inspiring place to live and work.
For people with disabilities, the barriers in the built environment have always been a problem. Thinking about the universal design and really the goals that we were trying to achieve made me realize how important architecture and design is to full inclusion for all people.
Disability community and the broader community are very proud of this facility. There was a lot of support for it throughout the community.
We went from being kind of not my neighborhood to, oh yeah, come here, come on, let's go, let's do it. It'll be great, we'll love it, it's going to be wonderful.
We had 13 years in which to design this building and really to figure it all out. And so a lot of what we did is we worked on how do people with different disabilities use it, and how do people with different disabilities have differing and sometimes conflicting needs. Sometimes the solution for one person creates a barrier for another.
One of the wonderful things about the Ed Roberts campus is there's an open space. I never feel like I've got to wind my way through a bunch of obstacles. It's amazing to me just to be able to get in and out of the building without having to negotiate everything.
In front of the building, there's the textures of the concrete. The concrete is also different colors. It's a way of letting people who are blind know how to find the front door, but not becoming a barrier then for people who are wheelchair users. So one of the incredible things about this building is that it brings universal design to a level where it's combining universal design with aesthetics. That's a really important piece of this. It's making universal design something that's not institutional and cold.
The concern all along is we didn't want the building to look like a hospital. This building is showing us
place that's a world-class center on disability has made us realize that we wanted to do more than we've been doing, do more national programs and really have a bigger impact on our community. Previously, the agencies were scattered throughout the city and really didn't have the kind of visibility or, frankly, political clout that we do now being together.
We're collaborating more. We're learning about the issues that each one of us are working to challenge the status quo. You know, the people who are blind learn about people who are deaf. They hear about people with developmental disabilities, people with physical disabilities. We're not segmented anymore.
I'd like to see universal design get to the point where green design is now. I think universal design is the next strategy that should become part of all design. You can build a universally designed building that's usable by a broad range of people and have it be very beautiful and functional as well.
Designers and architects shouldn't think about the code requirements as restraints. They should see how designing for a diverse community is an opportunity to be creative and to open the world for more people.
Not everybody is 6 foot. Not everybody is, able-bodied. Not everybody is 35 years old. It's clear that it can be solved. I mean, it got solved.
The building has become an icon for the disability community worldwide.
Universal design really is good design. It really is making buildings that are functional and that really adapt to the people who are going to be using them, as opposed to having people adapt to the built environment. That's the way it should be.
One of the things I love about this video is what the architect said about universal design being a social justice issue, because I think a lot of times when we have diversity conversations, people with disabilities get left out or they get tagged, added on at the end like an afterthought. But from a civil rights point of view, we are a protected class. The American legislative body has decided that we're supposed to have equal opportunities and equal rights, and they've enacted all these laws, including laws about physical access. But it's still, I would say, something of an uphill battle, pun intended, to get architects to think beyond code, to think about making it work for everyone, because you could see on the ramp in the building that 2 wheelchairs could pass each other. That takes a lot of width. Our building on campus, which was built in early 2000 and we moved in 2002, we did that. We made the hallways wide enough so 2 wheelchairs could pass. We have a front desk that has 3 tiers so that a wheelchair can pull up and fill out a form, a wheelchair user or someone who is slightly taller, and then we have a really high one for somebody that is either tall or needs to stand to fill out paperwork. The other thing I really like about this video, and it looked to me at the end like the architect paid for it to be done, is that it's just a beautiful building. And the play of light in it, it doesn't look institutional. It looks like it could be a museum or an art institute or something like that. It doesn't look like special ed, and it doesn't look like a treatment facility. So it means a lot to me personally, and as an advocate for people with disabilities. Has anybody been there? Well, I encourage you to go and check it out. The other thing, as a person with a disability, a highly visible disability, is when you go there, there are so many people with all types of disabilities just going about their business that it's one of the few times I don't feel like I stand out. And there's a lot to be said for that. I think when you're designing, if you're designing products, you really need to think about all of the people that might use it and make it as user-friendly for the biggest group as possible. I think OXO, the company that makes kitchenware and utensils and things like that, they do an excellent job of that because they think about grip strength, they think about, throw it in the dishwasher, they think about durability, and when you're designing products for assistive technology, one of the things that I can't even count how many people have tried to give me or have given me those reacher things. It has kind of a pistol grip, and then it has pinchers on the end. That hurts my hand. I can't use that. And if I am able to somehow pick something up, the weight of the stick hurts my hand. So I use kitchen tongs instead to pick stuff up off the floor. So, Dave was talking about failure. Think outside the box, and if you think of something that you think might be usable for somebody to do a specific task, if you're thinking about somebody who uses a chair or somebody who uses crutches, find somebody and ask them to try it out for you. And they may tell you right away, no, this won't work. Here's why. And then you might save yourself some time designing for your imaginary user. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Well, I looked at this video and what impressed me about it was that, first of all, it's a beautiful space. It's a lot of space. And I think structures like this really push the envelope because they're showing what could be done. So they're setting a high example and other people can follow. So I think that's a really important part of this. And we also, the class went to the Magical Bridge Playground, which is an inclusive, accessible playground for kids. And that's another example of them really thinking hard about the people who are going to use that. And they're setting an example as well. So I think these example setting moments and spaces are really important because it shows what can be done. That was, it's a beautiful place. And I can't get around that.
Yeah, it really is. And another thing I like about it is all the glass. They showed a picture of one of the conference rooms, and it's all glass, and you see a bunch of people in wheelchairs in there. It's not, you don't get the feeling of sort of being shuffled off into the corner, and you sit there and we'll go ahead and have our meeting. It's lots of people with wheelchairs, and they're just doing their thing, they're not being, I like to say professional disabled people. They're just doing their jobs. Yeah?
So in the video they mentioned that sometimes the needs might be in conflict with one another, and they gave the sidewalk as an example of that. Are there other examples?
I probably could think of a few, but to elaborate on the sidewalk one, because that's kind of a sore point for a lot of us. So in curb cuts, most of the ones the newer ones on campus anyway, they have a plate that's either glued or screwed down or both that has those raised bumps on them. And they're not comfortable to go. The purpose is to alert people using blind people using canes that they're making a transition from a sidewalk to the street. or vice versa. But they're not comfortable to roll over in a wheelchair, particularly. And I've heard many stories of people using walkers who almost fall because their wheels get stuck on the bumps. And I've heard that there's somewhat of a monopoly on the companies that make those, and they've lobbied for their design to be the only standard, and it's a racket, in my opinion. I don't know if, because it used to be, before they started doing those plates, they cut grooves into, the recessed grooves into the slope, so that if you were using a cane, it would go across, and you would know that you were going down or up onto a different level. And because the grooves were recessed, it didn't interfere with a wheelchair, it didn't interfere with a walker, but it was different. And I don't know who convinced whom that this was better, but the other thing it does is it adds literally $10,000 or more to every curb cut they put in. And I used to be on an advisory committee in Sunnyvale about disability and access, and the Public Works Department would come and say, you know, we would love to put more of those in every year, but we have to put, it's required by the state architect of California to put these plates in. So we can't just pour the concrete, we have to put the plate in, and it costs way more. So that's a real example you can get your arms around, I think.
I was wondering what your experience has been here at Stanford about doing anything that gets beyond the uniform federal accessibility standard minimums and things getting built.
I think I've had the most success at having influence in housing, and I think we put in more units, for example, without carpet, that they might have otherwise, and being thoughtful about accessible rooms with accessible bathrooms and building those in. I would say I've been less influential. I've been here almost 20 years in May. Less influential about classrooms and other buildings like that. Frankly, they just don't ask me about those. But our building, our first floor, I was really happy to have a fair amount of influence on that. One of the things that I suggested that they did, I don't know how many people know, but the height of a counter in the code is a range. I believe it's 28 inches to 36 inches. And when I first got here, I noticed that invariably they were putting them in at the top of the range. And that's too high for somebody my size or somebody that doesn't have much upper body strength. So I talked them into putting things in about 33. Middle of the range works for the most number of people. And so in our offices, our built-in desks are, I don't know if it's 32 or 33, but in theory, a person in a wheelchair could sit in any of our offices. The one I have is a little bit bigger, but the other offices would work. And we also have the overhead cabinets a little bit lower than usual, so you can actually open it and from a wheelchair and use at least the lower shelf.
I also had a question. You mentioned those odd-colored things at the curb cuts, and usually wheelchairs have a range of how wide apart the wheels are, and walkers have a similar range. It's a pretty narrow range. And I wonder if someone said, like from this design class, let's build these with flat tracks at those two places in the width, and the rest is fine. How could one go about implementing such a thing and getting it done here?
Here? You would have to take on the state architect because they are going by the state code. And so you couldn't sell something to Campus Construction that was not compliant with state code. So that would be a tough one to take on because I think it's a pretty heavy-duty lobby.
Do you know if the architect is working on any other buildings in the Bay Area?
I don't know. I haven't researched him. Yeah. I think it was inspired, they talked about Ed Roberts, and I don't know if you've talked about him in the class. He had polio as a child, I believe, and was severely disabled and needed to be on a vent at night to sleep. And eventually I think he used a vent during the day as well. But he was on a kind of it was more like a gurney than a wheelchair by the end of his life. But he started the independent living movement at Berkeley. He wanted to go to Berkeley, and they'd never had anybody at that point who was disabled as he was. And eventually Berkeley had a whole program for people with severe disabilities. And then the city of Berkeley he started influencing how they were doing their accessibility for the city of Berkeley. And he was under Governor Brown the first time. He was appointed head of the Department of Vocational Rehab. And he went all over the world pushing independence, access, all those things. So I think he was the biggest inspiration for the building. I think people wanted to feel that Ed would have approved of that building.
Ed was actually on Iron Lung at the beginning.
Yeah.
And when I knew him, he had a air pump. He had like a cigar holder, and when he needed to take a breath, he would just close his lips over that, and the air would be pumped into his lungs. And when he needed to exhale, he just opened his lips. So he got along like that for a long time.
My favorite story about Ed Roberts, a former boss of mine told me, Sid Walensky, who is a disability rights attorney, and he knew Ed, and they went on, I don't know, I assume it was a business trip, but anyway, they went to Spain, and Ed wanted to go to a bullfight really bad, and so they organized several big, strong guys to physically carry Ed up into this really old stadium that was completely inaccessible, up to the bullfight so he could watch it. And he hated it and immediately wanted to leave. Which I just think that's great. Because that's the other thing, there are many stereotypes about people with disabilities, but one of the classics is the ungrateful crip. And that's, well, we did all this for you. What do you mean you don't like it? And so that's my favorite Ed story. I met him a couple times. He was very mellow.
So I want to mention that at the last Rehab Engineering Conference I was at, there was a discussion about the role of universal design in assistive technology. And we went back and forth. They actually had a debate between the two teams. And it was really interesting. So as we saw in the film, there was a fellow that said, well, if you do something that will help one person, one disability group, it may not help another disability group. So that isn't really universal design if you can't.
No.
So there are limits to what universal design can do. And in my mind, I was going through this, and I sort of figured out that universal design works best in infrastructure so the roads and the buildings and stuff like that everybody has to use. But on the other hand, it doesn't work so well for equipment that has to be customized and personalized, or it has to be, or people might want something that looks one way versus another way. So, so universal design doesn't always work. So for things that are really personal rather than infrastructure, universal design may be hard.
I think it is more of an infrastructure issue. For the equipment, I would be inclined to argue for universal access to the right equipment, because the problem with equipment and many things like wheelchairs, just tip of the iceberg, types of durable medical equipment that need to be so specialized to the individual. Not everybody that needs the equipment is getting it. And that's an issue too. Yeah.
So is the Ed Roberts campus a one-off then? Because the state architect must have signed off on it, and so is it meant to be an example, or is it?
Well, they signed off on it because it far exceeds code, but if you noticed, the curb cuts on the street had those plates on them. So the cement they were talking about was right in front of the building on a otherwise flat surface. So they're directing blind people in an area where the state architect doesn't care, basically. I mean, the surfaces of sidewalks, if you go to Mountain View is one example I can think of, where they put in these decorative stones into the sidewalk, and they suck to ride over in a wheelchair. But they don't, I guess they don't violate code, so they got to do that. Yeah.
Is anybody working to try to change the codes?
I think people work on the codes all the time, but it's difficult because we still don't have huge numbers of professional people with disabilities that are able to lobby and spend the time it takes to change laws. And it also isn't necessarily what a person with a disability wants to spend their life doing. So it's really hard. And I think in some ways we're still fighting for basic civil rights in a lot of ways. In California and in Stanford and the Bay Area, we have it really easy compared to a lot of parts of the country. And I think I would not say that I have a lack of job security in terms of constantly trying to keep it going. But I think people are trying all the time to make things better. It's just very hard, especially if there's a vested interest like the company that makes these plates. Yeah?
When did curb cuts start having the bumps required versus like indentations or other ways of signaling to blind people?
I don't know the exact date, but I would guess it was somewhere in the 90s, because that's when I first started to notice the change. But I think it's been an evolution, because they actually are more bumpy now than they were 10 years ago. They're more raised. So they're far worse than they were 10 years ago, from my perspective.
Go over those bumps with that carton full of soda.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking if there's no other questions about universal design at Roberts, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your office and what it does.
Sure. Basically, our office is mandated with providing academic and other being housing, mainly accommodations for students at Stanford, both undergrad and grad. We serve students with all types of disabilities, everything from quadriplegia to severe allergies, deafness, vision impairment, you name it. And our numbers are up to about 10% of the student population. That includes every type of disability. I think there are more students using wheelchairs and scooters at Stanford right now than there ever has been before, which is very cool for me, and is also one reason why housing has been proactive about making more accessible spaces, because if you keep adding a couple more students every year than you had before, the few spaces that were accessible are already occupied. So,
Is the word getting out about Stanford and its enhanced accessibility?
well, during the decision-making period, every year I meet with, I would say, 2 to 4 students who use chairs, and often their families, and they're deciding between Stanford and Harvard and Yale often. And one of the things, we do have a good reputation nationally, Stanford, for being accessible and providing good services. We also have better weather. It doesn't snow here, which is big if you use a wheelchair. Berkeley also gets a fair number of students because of the weather factor too. But we're actually way more accessible in some ways than Berkeley because they're so hilly. And even though we aren't, if you ever tried to push a chair around campus, you would quickly find it's not as flat as it looks, but we're flatter than Berkeley by far. We try and advocate for students and get faculty to understand why a student needs, say, time and a half on an exam. Till the term is level the playing field. It's to bring a student with a particular type of disability up to the point of competing with his peers on a level basis. It's not to give him an advantage.
And you make those decisions?
We make those decisions based on medical documentation and or testing if it's a learning disability. The learning disability specialists get really intensive testing to find just the right accommodations for each student. It's all extremely individualized. 2 students with relatively similar disabilities might have completely different accommodations.
What sort of services does your office provide? I know there's a lot of electronic stuff that you do.
We hire sign language interpreters and steno captionists. Steno captioning is the live captioning of a class for students with hearing impairments who may not use ASL. We convert text into electronic text and Braille. We loan some equipment to students, things like FM systems, and that's where you put a mic on the instructor and it transmits to the student who either has a headset or is able to connect with his hearing aid. We provide scrubbed laptops for exams for students that need to use a computer for their exams. We write letters to professors that say, John Doe is registered with us, we've reviewed his documentation, and these are the accommodations we recommend. And then we talk to professors if they have questions about those accommodations.
I know No, I know that students can be stressed out quite a bit, and I think I've actually seen students with dogs and professors that have dogs that I think provide that stress relief. Do you account
So,
stress as
yeah.
disability?
So that, usually there are other diagnoses that go along with that. Generalized anxiety disorder, for example, stress is exacerbated for somebody with that. And so the brief wrap on animals is there are service dogs. They are trained to do something. There are also miniature horses, but we have not had one yet. But they serve as guide animals. The reason they had a big lobby, and the reason that they are a good guide animal is that they live a lot longer and they can work a lot longer than a dog. Then there are what Stanford is calling assistance animals, which are also called emotional support animals, comfort animals, companion animals, therapy animals. And those are animals that, the way I try to explain it to administrators is that a service animal is doing something for the person with a disability that it was trained to do, a function. The assistance animal's presence is what is helpful to the person with a disability. And that's supported by the Fair Housing Act more than any of the other usual laws that we refer to, 504, ADA. And the Department of Justice decided that the Fair Housing Act mandates that if having an assistance animal better enables a student, a renter or a tenant to enjoy the benefits of their housing, and they can show documentation that they have a disability, and the doctor's note says how this animal benefits the person, then they should be allowed to have it, even if the property has no pet policy. And there's been a huge uptick in people taking advantage of that. And I don't mean taking advantage in a negative way. I just mean that more and more people are learning about that. So we get documentation, and then I email somebody in housing and say, Jane Smith is registered with us, and I'm supporting her having an assistance animal.
About human caretakers.
We haven't had a whole lot, but every once in a while there's a student who basically needs a 24-hour person. And in that case, we make sure that the student has housing that will accommodate living with the other person. And in undergrad housing, they don't pay a higher rent for that.
Stanford pays for it.
Well, they don't pay for it. A caregiver is personal assistance, and the law says that the person with the disability is responsible for hiring and paying a personal assistant. We provide space for that person, and we authorize parking and things like that, but we're not paying them.
It's often commented that the biggest population of people who will need assisted devices are the coming boomers who are edging into their 60s and whatever. And I wondered, does your office get involved at all with seniors who live on campus? I know there are not as many certainly as students.
Our office is specifically mandated to serve students. There's a diversity and access office headed by Rosa Gonzalez, and Sheila Sanchez is the ADA coordinator, and they serve the larger community at Stanford, as well as visitors to campus, coming to events, and faculty and staff accommodations go through them also.